The starship slipped through Earth's atmosphere with the grace of a falling star, its silver hull glowing softly as clouds rolled past beneath it. Lyra pressed her hand against the reinforced observation window, unable to look away. Earth filled the horizon. Blue oceans shimmered like liquid sapphire under the sun. Vast green continents stretched across the planet's surface, broken by winding rivers and glittering cities whose lights sparkled even in daylight. It was beautiful. Wildly, impossibly beautiful. On Varelia, everything was orderly. Every city was designed according to mathematical perfection. Every structure served a purpose. Every street, every garden, every tower existed exactly where logic dictated it should. Earth was nothing like that. From orbit, it looked alive, untamed, as if the planet itself refused to obey a blueprint. And for reasons she could not explain, Lyra loved it instantly. A strange sensation tightened in her chest. Excitement, nervousness, wonder. Her instructors had spent years preparing her for this mission. She knew hundreds of human customs, thousands of words from Earth's languages, the correct posture for diplomatic meetings, the proper tone for negotiations, even the recommended breathing patterns when interacting with humans for extended periods. They had trained her for everything. Everything except how she was supposed to feel. And now, staring at the world below, emotions she had never experienced before pressed against her carefully controlled thoughts. Curiosity, anticipation, and something deeper. Something dangerously close to longing. The ship settled onto the landing platform with barely a vibration. A moment later, the airlock doors opened. Lyra stepped forward. Every movement was graceful and precise, the result of a lifetime of discipline. Then she saw the humans waiting beyond the docking bay, and all her preparations suddenly felt inadequate. Humans were impossible. Their faces changed constantly. A smile became a frown. A frown became laughter. Emotions flashed across their expressions in seconds, revealing thoughts they didn't even seem aware they were sharing. Some waved. Some whispered to one another. One young technician nearly dropped a data tablet because he was staring at her instead of where he was walking. Lyra blinked. On Varelia, such behavior would have been embarrassing. Here, it was somehow charming. The lead human diplomat stepped forward and offered a welcoming smile. "Welcome to Earth, Lyra." 3 simple words. Yet hearing them sent a strange warmth through her chest. For the first time in her life, Lyra realized something important. She had traveled across the stars expecting to study humanity. But standing there beneath Earth's blue sky, she had the unsettling feeling that humanity was about to change her, far more than she could ever change them. Their hands moved freely in gestures she didn't fully understand, and their voices carried warmth and humor, things avoided. Lyra tried to observe carefully, hiding the quickening of her pulse, the tightness in her chest, the strange flutter in her stomach. Her quarters were small, designed for efficiency. The bed was human-sized, soft, and unfamiliar under her long, delicate frame. She had spent the journey in a compartment with only her thoughts, calculating every possibility, analyzing every sensation. Now, in the quiet of her room, she felt something she could not measure: loneliness. It pressed at her heavier than any gravity she had trained under. A soft knock startled her. The door slid open, and a human appeared, carrying a thin blanket. His brown hair was messy, his clothes casual, and his eyes wide but kind. "Hi, I'm Ethan. Looks like we share a room," he said with a nervous smile. Lyra tilted her head, examining him. Humans were strange creatures. Their emotions leaked through every movement. Their warmth was visible, and their presence seemed to occupy space in a way Varelians did not. "We share?" she asked, her voice precise but curious. Ethan nodded, holding the blanket out. "Yeah, it's small, but we can make it work." She hesitated, feeling an unfamiliar stir inside her. On Varelia, sharing personal space was rare, even dangerous. But here, she felt drawn to this human in a way she could not understand. Without thinking, she accepted the blanket. "Then we shall share," she said softly. The first night was strange. Lyra lay beside him, careful not to touch, careful not to breathe too close. Yet the warmth was undeniable. She could feel his steady breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, and the faint scent of earth and sunlight that clung to him. It was foreign yet comforting. She found herself relaxing, her body no longer tense with alertness. In the dark, she noticed the tiniest details, the way his hand occasionally brushed the blanket against hers, how he murmured softly in his sleep, how the rise and fall of his chest seemed to synchronize with something inside her. She did not understand these sensations, and that made them all the more powerful. She had never felt like this before. On Varelia, connection was intellectual, controlled, measured. Here, next to this human, she felt something unmeasured, unpredictable, and alive. She wanted to linger in it, to explore it, to understand it. But fear whispered at the edges of her mind. Attachment was dangerous, unwise, and potentially devastating. Yet she could not pull away. She did not want to. As the night deepened, she realized something astonishing. She was not just observing him, she was feeling with him, sharing something intangible and extraordinary. A small smile touched her lips as she thought, perhaps this human is not so confusing after all. By the time dawn broke over Earth's horizon, painting the room in gentle gold, Lyra felt a shift inside her. The loneliness had softened, replaced by curiosity, warmth, and an inexplicable sense of closeness. She did not yet understand what these feelings meant, but she knew one thing clearly. This human had changed something within her. And for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to hope. Lyra awoke to sunlight spilling across the room, golden and soft, touching Ethan's hair and the curve of his face. For a moment, she just watched, unable to tear her eyes away. The human beside her moved with such effortless life, stretching and yawning in a way that seemed natural, simple, and beautiful. On Varelia, mornings were precise, regulated, and silent. No one yawned lazily. No one allowed their body to speak before the mind commanded it. Yet here in this quiet human room, she felt something stir inside her that she had never felt before. Fascination, warmth, and an odd fluttering sense of connection. Ethan noticed her gaze and smiled a little sheepishly. "Good morning," he said, voice soft and sleepy. Lyra blinked and returned the greeting, but her heart pounded in her chest, faster than any calculation should allow. She realized that humans had a way of communicating beyond words, through presence, through subtle gestures, through small, ordinary moments. It was overwhelming, confusing, and beautiful. She decided to study him, as her training had always dictated, but not in the usual cold, analytical way. She wanted to understand him, not just his logic or habits, but the way he made her feel, the strange pull of comfort and curiosity, the stirring of emotions she had no names for. She watched as he got out of bed, rubbing his eyes, blinking at the morning light and humming softly. The sound was simple, yet it penetrated deep into her consciousness, leaving her strangely restless yet calm at the same time. Lyra's reflection in the mirror caught her attention. Her skin shimmered in the morning sun, silver and fluid. But for the first time, she noticed a subtle shift within herself. The rigid composure she had carried for years was softening. Her thoughts, once precise and calculated, now swirled with fragments of emotion she could not control. She felt nervous, excited, and even a little afraid all at once. Yet she realized she did not want to resist. The day unfolded with small moments that seemed ordinary to Ethan, but extraordinary to Lyra. He laughed at a silly video on a small device, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. He offered a stranger directions outside, smiling despite the cold wind, and she felt awe, admiration, and something else she could not yet name. Humans were messy, unpredictable, illogical, but in those small actions, they revealed courage, kindness, and a type of beauty that Varelians had never cultivated. That evening, when the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the room in soft shades of orange and pink, Lyra found herself returning to the bed she had shared with Ethan the first night. She hesitated at the door, unsure if she should enter, but her curiosity, and the strange pull she felt, were stronger than fear. "Lyra." Ethan's voice was gentle, filled with quiet hope as he looked up from a small book he was reading. I wish to sit," she said, stepping inside carefully. Her movements were deliberate, precise, but her heart raced uncontrollably. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the faint human scent that lingered in the room. the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was comforting, grounding, and entirely new. He nodded and gestured to the bed. "You can sit or lie down if you want." Lyra hesitated, but eventually slid under the blanket beside him. She did not touch him, not yet, but simply lying there close brought a sense of peace she had never known. Her mind, always so controlled, felt free. The boundaries she had been taught to respect so strictly were fading, replaced by a strange, undeniable connection. As darkness settled, she realized she was no longer observing life from a distance. She was part of it. The alien training, the lessons of diplomacy, the rules of logic, they all remained, but they were softened, reshaped by something she could not name. She had begun to awaken to the power of connection, the beauty of shared space, and the quiet strength of human presence. For the first time in her life, Lyra allowed herself to feel without restraint. She felt comfort, curiosity, wonder, and a deep emotional stir that made her chest ache with longing. And in that quiet, shared space, she understood something extraordinary. Humans had the power to awaken the soul in ways that logic and precision never could. As Ethan's breathing deepened and he drifted into sleep, Lyra stayed awake a little longer, letting the warmth and the strange new feelings wash over her. She did not fully understand them, but she did not want to. For the first time, she felt alive in a way that her training had never prepared her for. She felt human, and she realized that sharing a bed with this human, simple, ordinary, imperfect, was the beginning of a change she could not yet predict, but one she could no longer resist. The days passed quickly on Earth, each one full of small surprises that fascinated Lyra. Every time she observed Ethan, she discovered something new about humans, about him, about life, and about herself. Humans were messy, unpredictable, and loud. Yet beneath their chaos, there was a strange beauty she could not resist. On Varelia, emotions were tightly controlled, carefully measured, and rarely displayed. But here she saw kindness, courage, and humor flowing freely, as if these feelings were part of the air itself. Lyra began to follow Ethan, not in a secretive or manipulative way, but simply to learn. She noticed how he greeted strangers with genuine warmth, even when he was tired or preoccupied. She watched as he helped someone struggling to carry a heavy package, smiling as if it cost him nothing. She saw him stumble in small ways, make mistakes, yet continue forward with resilience she had never witnessed among her own people. Each moment left a spark in her mind, a fragment of wonder she couldn't fully understand, but wanted desperately to explore. One afternoon, while Ethan was sorting through books in their shared quarters, Lyra asked, "Why do you help people when it is inconvenient? Why do you smile at strangers who are not kind to you?" Ethan looked up slightly, startled by the question. His brown eyes softened. "I guess it's just how we live. We can choose kindness even when it's hard, even when no one notices. It doesn't always make sense, but it feels right." Lyra's silver blue eyes widened slightly. Choice. Humans could choose kindness, bravery, and love, even when it was inconvenient. On Varelia, actions were calculated, logical, and measured. There was no room for randomness, for emotion that defied practicality. But here, in the simple act of smiling, of helping, Lyra saw power, she saw freedom. That evening, she lingered near the window, watching the sun set in gold and pink streaks across the horizon. Ethan joined her, standing silently at her side. Lyra felt the human warmth radiating from him, a comforting presence she had grown to depend on. She noticed how he didn't need words to make her feel included. The way he existed in the world, fully human and fully himself, fascinated her beyond measure. "Humans are strange," she said softly, almost to herself. Ethan chuckled. "You can say that again. But you are unpredictable. You act against logic, and yet your lives seem stronger for it." He smiled and tilted his head. "Maybe we're strong because we try, even when it's messy." Lyra considered this strength, resilience, choice. These were concepts she had studied but never truly understood. Observing Ethan, she felt them in her chest, a stirring that made her heart race. She had come to Earth to observe, to learn. But she realized now that she was not just learning about humans, she was learning about herself. That night, Lyra hesitated at the door of their shared quarters. The blanket from the first night lay neatly on the bed, inviting and warm. Her heart beat quickly. She wanted to join him, to feel the steady, grounding presence that she had come to crave. But fear whispered. Attachment could be dangerous. Her Velian supervisors had warned her not to form bonds with humans. Emotion was a vulnerability, yet the pull was stronger than her fear. She stepped into the room, careful and deliberate, and climbed into bed beside Ethan. She did not touch him, not yet, but simply lying there close brought a sense of peace she had never known. The quiet rhythm of his breathing seemed to synchronize with something inside her, a steady heartbeat that calmed the storm of new feelings swirling through her mind. In the darkness, she allowed herself to reflect. Humans, chaotic and unpredictable, had something her people lacked. They had the ability to act with emotion, to choose love, courage, and kindness, even when it didn't serve their immediate needs. That choice, she realized, was the source of their strength. And as she lay beside Ethan, she understood that this simple connection, sharing warmth, sharing space, was teaching her more than any lesson she had ever received. By the time Ethan drifted into sleep, Lyra stayed awake a little longer, feeling a strange mix of emotions: curiosity, admiration, longing, and a quiet joy she could not name. She realized that humans could awaken something inside others that no logic or training ever could. And she understood with a clarity that both thrilled and frightened her, that the bond forming between her and Ethan was changing her. She was no longer just an observer, she was a participant, a learner, and perhaps something more. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to wonder what it might mean to truly connect with a human. And in that moment, she knew that her life on Earth and her understanding of herself would never be the same again. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of Earth's forests and distant rain. Lyra paused outside the door of their shared quarters, hesitating. Her mind was a swirl of thoughts, curiosity, and fear. She had already felt warmth beside Ethan, had already felt the strange grounding pull of his presence, yet stepping inside again carried its own risk. On Varelia, attachment to humans was frowned upon, considered a distraction that could weaken her focus, her identity, her very purpose. But tonight, the pull was irresistible. She entered quietly, moving with the same grace and care she always carried, though her heart raced unnaturally fast. Ethan was sitting on the bed, a small book resting loosely in his lap, the last rays of sun falling softly across his hair. He looked up startled, then smiled when he saw her. Lyra, his voice was gentle, filled with that quiet warmth she had come to crave. I wish to stay, she said softly, her words deliberate, yet carrying the tremor of emotion she could not control. Ethan's smile widened, reaching his eyes, and she felt a strange flutter in her chest. Then stay, he said simply, shifting slightly to make space. Lyra climbed into bed beside him, careful not to touch him at first, but feeling the warmth radiating from his body. It was different from the calculated warmth of Velians or the mechanical comfort of a bed. This warmth felt alive, responsive, real. The steady rhythm of his breathing matched something within her, something unmeasured, and she realized she no longer wanted to retreat. The room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of a small clock on the wall and the faint hum of the ship in orbit above Earth. Lyra turned her gaze to Ethan, watching as he closed his book and rested his head on the pillow. She felt an unfamiliar impulse to speak, to share her thoughts, not in calculated phrases designed to impress or inform, but in honest, raw emotion.
I never understood this,
She murmured. Humans, connection, warmth. It feels different from anything I have known. Ethan turned his head to look at her, his eyes gentle. It's not something you can always explain. You feel it, you share it, and sometimes it just is. Lyra considered this on Varelia. Every action had a reason, every word a purpose. Emotion was measured, analyzed, and controlled. But here, lying beside this human, she understood something extraordinary. Feeling did not always need a reason. Sharing a moment, sharing warmth was itself enough. It was a kind of freedom, and she felt herself drawn deeper into it. She shifted slightly, letting the blanket cover them both, and finally allowed her shoulder to brush against his. Ethan didn't move away. Instead, he adjusted slightly, as if acknowledging the contact without forcing it. That simple acceptance so natural to humans left her chest tight and her mind racing. She realized she was learning more from these small gestures than she ever had from lectures, lessons, or training. Lyra's thoughts drifted to all the rules she had been taught, the boundaries she was not supposed to cross, the detachment she was meant to maintain. But here with Ethan, she felt a different truth. Connection was not weakness, it was strength. The ability to feel, to share, to trust. These were not flaws, they were power. As night deepened, the shadows in the room stretching long and soft, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. The fear and uncertainty that had accompanied her arrival on Earth were fading. In their place was curiosity, warmth, and attentive courage. She realized she could exist beside this human, learn from him, and allow herself to feel without losing her identity. Ethan stirred slightly, half asleep, and murmured her name softly. Lyra felt her pulse quicken, but did not pull away. Instead, she stayed close, letting the comfort of his presence fill the empty spaces within her. The world outside, the chaos, the unknown, the fear, felt distant. Here in this quiet room, sharing a simple human moment, she felt something extraordinary. She belonged. And in that belonging, Lyra understood that this bond was not just a fleeting curiosity or a temporary lesson. It was a beginning, a shift in her perception, a quiet transformation. Humans were strange, unpredictable, messy, and beautiful. And sharing space with them, sharing trust and warmth, could change even the most disciplined, analytical soul. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future where she could carry this feeling with her. Not just the knowledge of humans, but the connection, the warmth, the courage that came from sharing life with one. And as sleep crept closer, she realized she had already begun to change, in ways she could never have predicted, and in ways she could never want to undo. Not everyone was pleased with Lyra's growing connection to Ethan. Reports from her Velian supervisors had arrived, cold and precise, warning her of the dangers of emotional attachment. Attachment to humans is dangerous, one message read. It compromises judgment, weakens the mind, and may interfere with your mission. Lyra read the words over and over, her hands trembling slightly. On Varelia, she had been trained to obey, to follow rules without hesitation. Logic was law, emotion was a tool at best, a vulnerability at worst. But now, lying in her quarters, thinking of Ethan's warmth, his laughter, his quiet strength, she felt something more powerful than fear or duty. Longing, she tried to follow the instructions to distance herself. That night, she made her bed alone, a deliberate separation, telling herself it was necessary. She spent the hours analyzing every interaction, every glance, every shared moment. Logic dictated she pull away, that she focus on her mission, on her duties. But the moment she lay alone, the emptiness pressed in on her like a heavy weight. Her chest ached with a strange human-like need, a yearning she could not quantify or control. Sleep came in fits, broken and shallow. In her dreams, she saw Ethan's face hurt his laughter, felt the warmth of his presence. The more she tried to resist, the stronger the pull became. It was disorienting, frustrating, and yet she could not stop herself from thinking of him. Humans, she realized, had a power that Varelians did not. The ability to awaken feelings, to make someone feel alive in ways that reason could never explain. During the day, Lyra forced herself into routine, moving through activities with precision. But every time she saw Ethan, every time he smiled or spoke to someone with casual kindness, her resolve weakened. She felt torn between duty and desire, between the life she had been trained to lead and the life she wanted to live. Every glance, every shared silence reminded her of what she was risking, and yet drew her further in. One afternoon, while Ethan was sorting supplies for a community event, Lyra approached him cautiously. I should not spend so much time near you," she said, her voice low and strained. Ethan looked up, frowning slightly. "Why not?" "We're friends, aren't we?" Lyra hesitated, unsure how to explain emotions that even she could barely understand. On Varelia, forming attachment to humans is discouraged. It isn't dangerous. It may interfere with my duties, my mind, my focus. Ethan's expression softened. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Lyra, feelings don't make you weak. They don't make you less capable. They make you human." The word hit her with unexpected force. Human. She had been observing humanity for weeks, learning, studying, and now Ethan was telling her that embracing these feelings was not a flaw, but a strength. Her chest tightened, and she realized that the fear that had governed her actions was fading, replaced by something stronger: courage. But courage was not without conflict. Her Velian instinct screamed at her to maintain control, to analyze, to distance herself. Every fiber of her training told her to obey, to suppress, to retreat. And yet, every moment with Ethan felt undeniably real, undeniably necessary. She could not deny the warmth she felt, the joy she felt in his presence, the strange growing bond that connected them in ways she could not measure. That night, she attempted to sleep alone again. The bed felt impossibly empty, the silence heavy with absence. She curled herself into a tight ball, trying to block out the thoughts of Ethan, but every heartbeat echoed with longing. Finally, she admitted to herself what she had feared for weeks. She could not resist him. She did not want to resist him. Lyra climbed back into the shared bed, hesitating only a moment before resting her head near his shoulder. Ethan stood slightly, half asleep, and murmured her name softly. She felt a rush of relief, of peace, of belonging, and for the first time, she let herself surrender to the connection, to the feelings she had tried to suppress. The struggle between duty and desire was not over. But Lyra realized something vital. Humans had the power to teach even the most disciplined soul that emotion could be strength. That connection could be a guiding force. She was changing not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And as she drifted into sleep, nestled beside Ethan, she understood that the greatest lessons were not taught in lectures or calculated strategies. They were learned in warmth, in shared moments, in the courage to feel, despite the risks. For the first time, Lyra was willing to risk herself, willing to embrace the unknown, because the bond she had discovered with this human was worth any danger her training had warned against. The days on Earth had begun to blur together for Lyra, each one leaving her more changed than the last. She no longer saw humans as distant, chaotic creatures to be studied. She saw them as something alive, vibrant, and real. Most of all, she saw Ethan, not just as a companion, but as someone who had unlocked a part of her she didn't know existed. It was a quiet evening when the revelation came. Lyra had been walking through a garden near their quarters, watching the way sunlight danced across leaves, the way the wind whispered through the trees. Everything seemed sharper, more vivid. Colors she had never noticed before glowed with meaning. And she thought of Ethan, the warmth of his presence, the softness of his voice, the gentle way he moved through the world. Everything about him had taught her something new. She paused near a small fountain, water trickling in a delicate rhythm, and realized with startling clarity that she had been holding herself back. Fear, duty, the strict rules of Aurelia. They had tried to control her, to keep her safe, to keep her separate. But here she had learned a truth that no law, no protocol, no training manual could teach. Connection, trust, and choice were the essence of strength. Humans could teach love, courage, and resilience in ways that no logic could explain. Lyra returned to their quarters that evening with a decision in her heart. She opened the door slowly, expecting hesitation, but instead found Ethan reading quietly, a soft smile on his lips. He looked up and immediately noticed her expression. "Lyra, you look different," he said softly. I think I understand now," she said, voice trembling slightly, filled with honesty she had never dared to express. "Humans, connection, warmth. I feel it. I feel it because of you, and I cannot turn away." Ethan set his book aside and moved closer, his eyes gentle and steady. "You don't have to," he said simply. Lyra's chest tightened. The words were simple, but their meaning hit her with the force of a meteor. She had feared attachment, feared emotion, feared losing herself. Yet, in that quiet room beside this human, she realized that attachment was not weakness. It was a revelation. She had grown stronger, braver, and more alive because of it. Sitting on the bed beside him, she took a deep breath and let herself open completely. She told him of her struggles, of the conflict between duty and desire, of the fear that had pressed on her since her arrival. Ethan listened without judgment, without expectation, simply offering his presence, his warmth, and his understanding. Lyra had never experienced anything like it. On Varelia, Words were precise, calculated, and measured. Silence was often preferred. But here in this room, she discovered a language beyond words. Empathy, trust, and shared emotion. It was powerful, grounding, and transformative. "You've changed me," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the quiet. "Not just because you are human, but because you exist the way you do, and you let me exist too." Ethan smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "We all change each other," he said. "That's what it means to live, to connect. You don't have to be afraid of it." Lyra looked at her hand in his, feeling the warmth, the rhythm of life, and something unspoken passed between them. She realized she could embrace these feelings without losing herself. She could be Varelian and still learn the human way of connection. She could keep her identity and still feel deeply, trust completely, and open her heart to the world around her. That night, as they lay side by side, Lyra allowed herself to rest fully. Without fear, without hesitation, the room felt safe. The world outside distant, she felt courage, peace, and a quiet joy that pulsed through her chest. Every fear she had carried, every rule she had followed blindly, seemed smaller, less important. She had found something greater, the strength of connection, the power of shared life, and the simple beauty of trusting another being completely. In Ethan's presence, Lyra discovered her own humanity, the courage to feel, to love, to accept. The alien girl who had arrived on Earth, cautious and measured, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone alive, someone transformed by the quiet power of human connection, and a sleep claimed her. She held Ethan's hand and whispered softly, "Thank you for showing me this." She knew she would carry this revelation with her forever, a treasure more precious than any knowledge or skill she had learned in her life. For the first time, Lyra understood fully, humans were not fragile, chaotic, or weak. They were capable of change, capable of love, capable of inspiring transformation in even the most disciplined, controlled soul, and she was living proof. The starship was ready to leave Earth, its engines humming quietly, carrying countless travelers back to the stars. Lyra stood at the observation deck, gazing down at the planet that had changed her in ways she could never have imagined. Blue oceans shimmered under the sunlight. Green forests stretched endlessly, and cities sparkled like stars scattered across the land. But Lyra's eyes were not on the planet alone. They were on Ethan, who stood beside her, his hand brushing gently against hers. For months, she had watched, learned, and felt in ways she had never thought possible. The alien girl who had arrived, precise and cautious, trained to follow rules and suppress emotion, was no longer the same. Every shared moment with Ethan, every conversation, every simple act of warmth had reshaped her. She had discovered courage, empathy, and the strange, exhilarating freedom of allowing herself to feel. Humans had taught her that connection was not weakness, it was strength. Ethan looked at her with that familiar, gentle smile. "You've changed," he said softly, his brown eyes reflecting both wonder and pride. Lyra nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "I have learned much more than I expected. Not about humans, but about myself." She took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of life coursing through her in ways Varelia's training had never prepared her for. "I understand now. Connection, trust, and warmth. They are the most powerful forces in the universe. You've shown me that." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "And you've shown me that even someone from another world can teach me how to see differently." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship beneath them, and the endless sky before them. Lyra realized that this was more than a goodbye. It was a promise. A promise that the lessons, the emotions, and the bond they had shared would continue to shape her wherever she went. That night, in the quiet of their shared quarters, Lyra reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the first night she had hesitated at the edge of the bed, the first moments she had felt warmth and curiosity beside Ethan. She remembered the conflict, the fear of attachment, and the struggle between duty and desire. Each challenge had been a lesson, each fear a stepping stone, guiding her toward understanding herself. Now, as she lay beside Ethan one final time on Earth, she felt complete. Her heart no longer trembled with uncertainty. Her mind no longer wrestled with rules that sought to contain her spirit. She was free, free to feel, to connect, to love, and to live fully. The alien girl who had arrived, cautious and reserved, had been transformed. Lyra turned to Ethan and whispered softly, "Thank you for everything. For patience, for warmth, for showing me what it means to truly connect." Ethan's smile deepened and he brushed a strand of her shimmering hair away from her face. "You didn't need me to teach you. You just needed to allow yourself to feel. You've changed because you chose to." Her chest swelled with emotion, a mix of gratitude, joy, and something tenderly human. She realized that change was not always sudden or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and powerful. It came in moments of trust, in shared silences, in the courage to let another being into one's heart. And she had embraced it fully. When the starship lifted from Earth, Lyra stood at the observation deck once more, her hand brushing Ethan's. She felt a warmth deep inside, a constant reminder that humans had a gift beyond calculation or logic, the ability to awaken others, to teach strength through connection. She had been awakened, transformed, and she would carry this gift across the stars. Lyra knew she was different now. She moved with a grace informed not just by training, but by heart. She spoke with clarity, shaped by both reason and feeling, and in her chest, a steady warmth reminded her every moment that she had been changed. Not by orders, not by rules, but by something far greater, the simple, extraordinary humanity of another being. Ethan looked at her, a question in his eyes that needed no words. Lyra smiled back, understanding without needing explanation. "Yes," she said softly. "I am ready for what comes next, and I am not afraid anymore." The ship glided silently through the cosmos, Earth shrinking into a glowing jewel below, while Lyra, the alien girl who had arrived with only rules and logic, embraced the infinite possibilities of feeling, connection, and courage. She had been changed forever, and it was beautiful. In the vastness of space, Lyra realized a truth that would remain with her for all time. Strength was not just in power or knowledge. Strength was in courage, in trust, in love, and in the willingness to allow oneself to change. And she had learned to be strong, fully, beautifully, and humanly alive.